cell number.
And we're live on HCAM Ed.
Okay. Do we have all of our committee members here? Do we have Carol? Let's just give Carol a minute to pop over.
Georgette, I'll remind you to start recording when the meeting starts.
So Amanda, am I correct that all the participants, with the exception of the panelists, all the participants are muted? There's a question in the chat box.
They should be. Georgette, can you confirm that?
They are all muted. They will have to submit their questions in writing.
Okay, I believe Carol is working on getting in. We could begin. I have a long script for remote meetings to read, so I think I'll go ahead and start. We have our quorum. I'll start slowly. Bob, you ready? Georgette, you ready to start recording?
HCAM Ed.
I am all set.
Okay, great. All right, good evening, Hopkinton, and welcome to the July 30th, 2020 Hopkinton School Committee meeting. This meeting is a public forum and it is being held remotely, so I need to begin this meeting by reading a script to you about why we are conducting this meeting remotely. As a preliminary matter, this is Amanda Fargiano. I'm chair of the Hopkinton School Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Nancy?
Yes.
Leah?
Yes.
Meg?
Aye.
Joe? Okay, we do not have Joe. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Dr. Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Ms. Rothman?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Carol, who would you want me to include as staff participating tonight?
And I believe Mr. Person.
Mr. Person?
Hi everyone, I'm on here. I think I might be frozen on your screen.
Mrs. Carver, are all the principals here? Mrs. Carver?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. DuBois?
Yes.
And is Ms. Parson here?
Ms. Parson is not here.
Okay, so is that everybody you're expecting?
I believe Mrs. Bolello too, but I know that she was going to sneak in under the wire because she had a meeting that was going to run till 7 o'clock.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so anticipated speakers on the agenda. We've gone through, there are no additional speakers outside of the staff and the members. Okay, so good evening. This open meeting of the Hopkinton School Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we are complying with the executive order that suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The executive order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as the public body makes provisions through adequate alternative means to ensure interested members of the public are provided reasonable access to the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. This is a public forum. During this meeting, just to explain the rules of public comment, we will be asking the community to please hold their questions until after Dr. Kavanaugh's presentation. At that point, you can put your questions in the chat that goes along with the webinar if you are registered for the webinar. If you are unable to register, we did hit our limit of 1,500 registrants, I believe. So if you were unable to register and you are watching via HCAM, we are also providing a mechanism to ask questions via text. The text number is 508-847-5637. 6732, and that was distributed today via email to all the school community. Let's see. For this meeting, the Hopkins School Committee is convening by Zoom video conference as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Additionally, the meeting may also be broadcast by HCAM through one of its many channels or platforms. We would like to thank HCAM. HCAM is broadcasting on live stream on YouTube as well as on HCAM TV, the Ed Station, which is I think 31 for Verizon and 96 for Comcast. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All meeting materials were included in the packet and provided to members of this body and are available on the town's website via the web meeting calendar unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to assure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will invite the board members to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking, and that's true for all participants in the webinar, please. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you to state your name and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For public comment, I will be identifying the person who posted the chat. It's a little bit different than our statement here because it will be written public comments. I will be identifying the person who's asking the question and reading the question verbatim. Okay, and one other comment for tonight's public forum. We are going to allow 1 hour of questioning after Dr. Kavanaugh completes her presentation. I know there are a lot of questions out there, so we want to be as generous as possible. So we're hoping to allow an hour for questioning afterward. Okay, I think that covers all of the administration. So at this point, I would like to please invite anyone who is willing and able to join me in standing to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, without any further ado, that brings us to the first and only item on the agenda, Dr. Kavanaugh, the 2020-2021 reopening plan presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Spargiano. I am going to share my screen so that people viewing at home are able to see each slide as I describe them. I'm going to work through the entire presentation, so if you're at home and questions kind of pop into your mind, you can just put them right into the chat. I am a little bit concerned that there are some people at home who are trying to get into this Zoom session, and it feels like it has capped us at 500, although we didn't think that that's what was going to happen. So an email went out this afternoon, maybe about 4:30, so you can actually log into this through HCAM if you like. If you just go back into your parent emails, you'll be able to find that and get right into HCAM. So without a lot of ado, I will get going. Oh, I do not have access to screen sharing, so someone's going to have to give me privilege to do that.
I believe that's Georgette.
I've got it. Yeah, thank you. All right, great. So let's get started. What you see on the screen now is just our title page. This is really just about reopening our schools. And it is a Herculean task, I can tell you, for all of our building administrators and our district administrators, our faculty, our paraprofessionals, our custodial and building and ground staff, cafeteria workers, secretarial staff, everyone who works in this district is literally working night and day, around the clock right now to really figure out what it's going to look like when we get to September and it's time to reopen our doors. As you know, we had about 114 parents apply to be on our reentry advisory group. I think we took 10 parents to serve on that group. And I want to thank all of the people who gave so generously of their time. We've had several meetings in the last 3 weeks, and I'm telling you, it's felt like we were on a treadmill. We just continue to meet and continue to meet and have wonderful dialogue. And I think that we've pushed back a little bit on each other, and we've thought very hard about all of the pros and cons and how to optimize education while also mitigating risk. So I'll just quickly read through these names because I think it's important that people know who the folks are who worked so hard on this committee. So in addition to me, Assistant Superintendent Jennifer Parson, Director of Finance Susan Rothermick, Director of Facilities Tim Person, Director of HR Kim Pulnick, School Committee Member Meg Tyler, Select Board Member Brendan Tedstone, our 5 building principals Evan Bishop, Alan Keller, Vanessa Bellello, Ann Carver, Lauren DeBow, the President of the Hopkinton Teachers Association, Rebecca Abate, and the President of the Paraprofessional Association, Rebecca Black. We have several teachers, Dina O'Shaughnessy, Tammy McGee, Caitlin Rosardi, Doug Scott, Jen Smith, and then we had the administrative assistant from the Hopkins School, Kim Picard. Our head nurse, Kathy Bain, Hopkinson's Director of Public Health, Sean McAuliffe, parent, Mariella Fablis, parent, John Graziano. I'll continue with the parents, Lisa Miracle, Jen Devlin, Carolyn Jackson, Nishith Chowdhury, Seth Ganem, Miles Cahill, Navdeep Singh, Kathleen Engelman, Kelly DePaulo, Frank Fiore. We had 2 students, Jasmine Batika and Danny Andrews. And then I'd also like to recognize Karen Zaleski, our Director of Student Services, Ashok Ghosh, our Director of Technology and Innovative Learning, and Ann Ben-Benick, HMS Assistant Principal, who all sort of assisted us along the way. What you see here are the subcommittees onto which we placed all of those people. They simply made requests as to their greatest area of interest. The larger names up at the top cover the central office administrator who chaired that particular committee. As you can see in the health conditions, including food service and building safety, there were many, many people who served on that committee. Other committees included transportation, curricular committees, building schedules committee, and then also a committee that is working with the HTA to build an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding with the Teachers Association. All right, this first slide talks about the models that probably rose to the surface as the ones that we were most interested in. And what we tried to do here was to show you, using colored cells, the kind of pros and cons of each one of those models. And so that middle column there does show you all of the criteria that we used to evaluate these. And so I'll walk you through this one because I think that this is a very, very important slide. The red cells indicate that the criterion was either impossible or much less desirable than an alternative might be. The yellow cells indicate that the criterion was feasible or neutral or maybe not quite ideal. It wasn't quite green. And then the green cells represent really what we perceive to be the best option. So the first model is in-school full-time. And in-school full-time means that we bring back all our 4,000 kids and they come back to school and they are in school for the 6.5-hour day. Now, naturally, we all really liked that because I think that we've all been missing school. But when we looked at the social distancing that was possible in our buildings based on our class sizes, physical classroom sizes, the space in a classroom, as well as the sizes of our cafeterias and our gyms and all of those things, it was only possible to socially distance our students at 3 feet. And for those of you who are familiar with the guidance documents that the Commissioner of Education put out across Massachusetts, you know that that was probably the first time you had ever heard that 3 feet was okay for social distancing. Yes, it was endorsed by the American Pediatric Association, but as a group, when we kind of looked at everything, we looked at, some of the science and the data, and we looked at the way people were feeling. It didn't feel to us like 3 feet of social distancing would be ideal or maybe even desirable. But when we got to the lunch criterion, that's when we sort of had to throw up our hands and say that in school full time probably would not work, because the commissioner's guidance says that at 6 feet, at lunch, you have to have 6 feet of social distancing. And to be honest, there was really no way to get our kiddos to 6 feet to eat lunch when we have, buildings that are already teeming with students and just not enough space to spread kids out at lunch like that. When we looked at transportation, our buses that we lease from Conley, our contract is with Michael J. Conley and Sons. They're 77-seat buses, and the commissioner has said we can put 26 students on those buses, 1 student per seat. So again, it was going to be very difficult to be able to transport all 4,000 students when you reduced the capacity of your buses by 2/3. Naturally, the educational quality of this model is the absolute best. That's what we want. We want kids in front of teachers every single day. Despite the fact that you see all of those red cells, this one here is, it's clearly the best educational quality, but it's kind of a no can do. The other thing that we looked at with educational quality was the mental health criteria. And we really believe that bringing our kids back is great for mental health, social emotional learning, nutritional health, all of those pieces in that box right there would have been bright green for us. We examined parental feedback, and when we had sent out a survey asking parents if they felt like they would be comfortable coming back with the social distancing of 3 feet being in school full time, 37% said no, they would not, and 24% said maybe. When you start to exceed 60% who are unsure about a model, that puts that model really on shaky ground as well. And then again, when we looked at safety for all community members, the commissioner and pediatrics were saying it was fine. We didn't know that we felt like it was fine. So we, in terms of safety, colored that one yellow. We couldn't say absolutely positively, no, it's unsafe, nor could we say that we felt that it was safe within sort of that shadow of a doubt. So I will move on to the hybrid model. This is the one that kind of rose to the top for us. It's an A-B day model, meaning that kids would come to school on one day and then they would have at-home learning on the next day. Then they would come to school, then they would have at-home learning. And those two things would go back and forth so that in the first week, for example, I might come to school on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And the second week, I would come to school on Tuesday and Thursday. On those off days, I would engage in what we are calling home learning. So, and that is different from remote learning. So people need to see that. In terms of lunch, if we reduce our kiddos by half, we are able to serve lunch if we're using both classrooms and the cafeteria. We can spread our kids out to that acceptable 6 feet of social distancing. When we thought about transportation, if we reduced our bus capacity by 2/3, and we were able to put 26 students in a bus. When we multiplied the 26 students by our 31 buses in the fleet, we got just over 800 students being transported. And we have 3 tiers of busing, so that would mean we could really transport about 2,400 kids a day. If we are able to transport 2,400 students a day and 50% of our parents, well, not quite 50, but close to 50, have said that they are able to drive their children or provide some form of transportation, that number right there will work. So that cell clearly is also a green cell. In terms of educational quality of that hybrid model, this is really important to think about. I know that there are some districts that are thinking about doing a week on, week off kind of a model. And we thought about that. We thought, what would happen if you bring kids in for a week, but then when they leave us on Friday, They're not coming back to us again until a week from Monday, which is essentially 10 days away. We as educators know that when we send kids out on a week's vacation, say in December or February or April, those 10 days that they're gone, right before the vacation, they sometimes become a little dysregulated. They feel, I think, uneasy about being out of school for that amount of time. When they come back, we sense that there's great learning loss. So it takes us a couple days to kind of get back into the rhythm of things. And we were fearful about how much learning and sort of, socialization would be lost if we went to a week on, week off model. It really is a medical model. And we keep thinking, but we're an academic institution. And so we liked the AB model a whole lot better. Now, I know people are also probably wondering, but can you clean the buildings overnight? And I will tell you that we have the electrostatic spray guns, and those sprayers can go into a classroom. And really, in a matter of minutes, those classrooms can be disinfected. We have 10 of those sprayers across the district. We have plenty of the product, and I'm very confident that we will be able to disinfect classrooms every single night. When we look at the educational quality of that model, coming every other day to school and then having home learning on the off day, what we also like about it, so we deemed it very good, was that it really kind of emulates the rhythm of the school year. If on a Monday I'm given some kind of an assignment and I can go home and maybe access some new learning electronically or through some reading, uh, there's a continuity that says I need to get this work done because on Wednesday I'm going back and I have to be accountable to my teacher. It's very different having a 1 day off as opposed to 10 days off when it gets very hard with procrastination to even figure out what it is that you're supposed to be bringing back with you. When we asked parents, what do you think of that hybrid AB day model? Would you send your kids back to school with social distancing of 6 feet and a hybrid model? 11% said no, still no, I would not do that. But 25% said maybe. So we've gone from being over 60% in that category down to 36% in that category. So it will be interesting to see how things fall out. And when we thought about safety for all of our community members, when we looked to the guidance and we read through some of the medical reports, 6 feet of social distancing is what's being advised everywhere. When you go in the grocery store, 6 feet of social distancing. And when we look at where Hopkinton has been practicing 6 feet of social distancing, or even Massachusetts, we are seeing very low numbers. So we felt like that box could be called yellow. Absolutely feasible. Would it be the best? No, the best might be not to have any physical contact, but without physical contact, we also don't have in school teaching and learning. So then we got down to the fully remote for all, and social distancing was not a concern, lunch was not a concern, and transportation wasn't a concern. So we put all of those things in there as a yellow neutral. When we looked at educational quality, I wouldn't want to say that, remote learning would not be a good model. We certainly could push out some good instruction. I would also argue that it's probably not the very best for kids who need to socialize, for kids who want to get back into school and that kind of mental health piece. So we ended up coloring that one red, maybe because it was the least desirable of all of them in terms of educational quality. Parental feedback, 10 to 35%, then we know say that they may actually choose this model as opposed to a hybrid model. And we get those numbers from up above. And then finally, the absolute green here is eliminating human contact. If we eliminate human contact, we eliminate risk of transmission. So we really did spend a lot of time thinking hard about do the benefits of having some kind of in-person and arguably mitigated risk form of in-school instruction up against that kind of, yeah, there's a little bit of risk, but we think that it beats not good for mental health and not really the best form of education. All of that said, what we are looking at right now is giving families the opportunity to choose either the hybrid AB day model or the fully remote model. And I want to spend a lot of time talking about those two things so that parents feel like they are making an informed decision when they get the survey. All right, before I launch into that, I really just want to remind the community of something that's really important. In-school instruction is only going to work in Hopkinton, only going to work in Metro West, only going to work across Massachusetts if we all kind of continue to think we have to do our part. We need for our people to practice social distancing. We need people to wear masks, to limit contact with other people, to wash your hands. And you'll see that, as we go and with the document that you get tomorrow, there is so much hand washing time or hand sanitizing time built into the school day because that's very important. And the last thing, and this one may be one of the most important, is just stay home when you're sick. Parents have emailed me over the last several weeks asking, are you going to relax the absenteeism standards? And that's kind of a slippery slope kind of a question because our legal counsel would tell us that when kids are out of school, we do have to send a letter to parents just in case something has happened. We want, some kind of documentation that we were reaching out. At the same time, we don't want kids coming to school when they are unwell. So we don't want you to feel like there's going to be, in some way, shape, or form, a family is going to get dinged. For example, if you keep your child out, that will not happen. For the safety of all people, please keep your child home if they are showing any signs of sickness, tiredness, fatigue, sore throat, runny nose, fever, any of those things. All right, I know that there are people out there also who are wondering, what is this document that we have to submit to the Commissioner of Education in Massachusetts tomorrow? And so what I've done here is I have taken a screenshot of exactly what that looks like. Essentially, this online portal has two sort of pages to it. The first page just takes a whole bunch of, sort of perfunctory data, things like what's your district, what's your contact name, what's your email address, what's the telephone number, what's the street address. So all of that happens on page 1. When we get to page 2, which is what you are seeing right here, the commissioner is asking for us to do 3 things. What is your full-time in-person learning model looking like? What is your hybrid learning model looking like? And what is your remote model looking like? And those 3 boxes take up to about 400 words. That's all. So I don't want people at home to think we have now committed to this, sort of A-B model that's carved in stone, or that there would never be an opportunity to have full-time in-person learning this year. This is a really 30,000 foot kind of a document. If the hybrid model seems to be going swimmingly and the virus plummets in terms of, the number of cases, we could go to full-time teaching and learning. In the event that this virus spikes, we could all go back to remote. So what this document does for the Commissioner of Education is it gives him insurance that we in Hopkinton have some kind of plan that we could easily and seamlessly transition back and forth out of. Number 6 on that document does say supporting high need students, and high need students here are defined as students with disabilities, English language learners, former English learners, and economically disadvantaged students. So what we need to do is to come up with some way that we are kind of giving those students additional support such that we would have gap closing measures. All right, this is an important slide. We are asking parents to make your binding decision by August 3rd. Tomorrow, what will happen is you'll get a survey and you'll also get an extremely extensive document. And I know you might be thinking, my gosh, it feels very short time from the time that Dr. Kavanaugh's letter came out the other day to the time when we have to make this decision. And I know that you're thinking a week may just not be enough time for my family to think about this, but we really need you to do that. And here's why. What's going to happen over the next 3 weeks is we are going to start to put students into sort of buckets. These are the kids who are coming back in the every other day hybrid model. These are the students who are coming back using that hybrid model, but because they qualify as high need students, they can come back every single day. These are the students who are choosing remote learning. So with 4,000 kids across our district and having these three spaces, the other piece that's really important for you to know is that we have some teachers who are really not comfortable coming back to school at all and have opted to take a leave of absence, for example. Or we might have teachers who have an underlying health condition who will not be able to return, or teachers who have child care issues, so they might not be able to return. So what we've got to start doing, and this is super important, is matching teachers to kids and then looking to see, are we going to need to hire other teachers, or are we going to need to have some kiddos taking a course online here or there? No, essentially we have to be able to match the needs of our students with the capabilities of our workforce. All right, before we talk about those plans, I know that there were several people who emailed the superintendent's office and said, are you going to show us that survey data? So I will just quickly zip through these slides. I want people to know it wasn't necessarily the survey data that was driving our decisions. No, did it inform the decision? Absolutely. Were there people who were working in those subcommittees who said, you know what, I would really like to know about what parents are thinking? And that was, the reason that you were getting these sort of short snippets of surveys every single day. We had curiosity about your thinking as a community and as a group of parents. So those were the surveys that went out. Yes, we certainly acknowledged your feelings in a lot of those, but we have to balance feelings with, what is the data telling us, what is science telling us, and all of those pieces kind of came together. You should also know that the reentry advisory group really informed our decision, but ultimately what sort of takes place is, and I think that I can honestly say that I think for the most part there was great consensus in our reentry advisory group, but ultimately those decisions come to the central office administrators and then they get passed on to the school committee, who on August 10th will vote on the survey. I'm sorry, the data that we're submitting to. All right, in the district-wide survey, the first one that we had sent out, we had 2,615 respondents. The question here that we asked parents was, would you send your children back to school with 6 feet of classroom social distancing, as well as appropriate precautions and PPE? Now, we have to remember that this particular when we look at this, it's not possible to bring our kids back unless all of our kids back at a distance of 6 feet. So if we wanted to bring back everybody, we were going to have to cut kids in half, or cut our population in half, so to speak. Anyway, of those people who were looking at the 6 feet of classroom social distancing, about 64% said, yes, I would certainly bring my kiddo back if I had 6 feet of classroom social distancing. 25.4% said, I'm not entirely sure right now. And 10.7% said, even with 6 feet of social distancing, no. Then we also asked them, would you send your children back to school with 3 feet of classroom social distancing, as well as appropriate precautions and PPE? And this time, what on that slide had been about 64%, went down to 38.9% of people said with 3 feet of social distancing, they would send their kids. 24.2% were still like, I am not entirely sure right now, but the percentage of no's went way up to 37%. And when we asked people who had answered yes, that they would send their children back to school at either 6 or 3, we asked them which they would prefer. And the options were a full-time return to school, and 46.2% of people said that.
Your what?
But we do know that at 6
Your
feet,
boy?
I think.
Excuse me, please mute your microphone if you are on this call and not Dr. Kavanaugh right now.
Thank you. And a hybrid model where students would be physically in school for partial days. For example, you could go 3.5 hours a day and not eat lunch at school, which would eliminate the 6-foot lunch problem that we had. And 12.6% of families thought that they would like to do a hybrid model where kids were, yes, they were in school for every day, but only for partial days. So you would have learning in the morning that was in person. And then when you went home and had some lunch, then you would have remote instruction or at home instruction after that. We asked people if they would prefer an alternating hybrid model where students were physically in school every other day. And 24.1% of folks said that. And then we asked about an alternating hybrid model where students were physically in school one week and receiving remote instruction the next week. And that came in at 17.1%. And we do need to remember that even though, folks were liking this full-time return to school, it was not possible unless you went to 3 feet of social distancing. All right, this slide here looks a little bit messy, but I can walk you through it. We asked parents, given that school bus transportation will have restrictions on the number of riders we could put in each bus, does your family absolutely need school bus transportation for your children? At Marathon, 226 parents said yes. At Elmwood, 302 parents said yes. At Hopkins, 334 parents said yes. At the middle school, 281 parents said yes. And at the high school, 268 parents said yes. Given those numbers, we believe that we can safely transport students using 31 buses in our fleet with 26 available seats, 1 student per seat on those buses. And we also said, tell us if you do not need transportation, and 1,149 parents said no, they did not need transportation. To be fair, 579 said that they were uncertain about transportation, and we will be asking you about transportation probably in that survey that comes out to you this weekend. So please be on the lookout for that. And then we had a high school survey. The high school subcommittee had some questions about maybe the high school people wanting to go back full time. We had 709 parents answer, and we put it out to students as well, and we had 511 students respond to it. I think what you're going to find kind of uncanny here is the similarity between the parent choices and the student choices. Oftentimes in the Hopkinton Public Schools, we'll send something out at the high school level to parents and we send it out to students. And the students will think this and the parents will think this. But in this case, they are, almost mirror images of each other. So 707 parents responded. 38.5% said they'd like a full-time return to school. 44.6% said they like the every other day hybrid model. And 17% at the high school level said that they would choose remote instruction only. Now, if you take a look at where the kids are, look at the similarity: 36.8 full-time return, 46.6 every other day, 16.6 remote instruction only. So it's clear that families have had conversations about this, and it feels like kids and parents are very much on the same page. And maybe I'm making an assumption about the data, so I want to be cautious about that, but it is very interesting how close these numbers are. Which grade levels responded? 17.1% of the respondents were ninth graders, 22.7% were 10th graders, 27.3% were 11th graders, and 32.9% were rising 12th graders. For the parents, 202 parents were parents of ninth graders, 232 were parents of 10th graders, 204 were parents of 11th graders, and 227 were parents of 12th graders. And naturally, those parents could have, multiple children throughout the high school. And finally, we had 955 respondents to the elementary scheduling committee survey. And what we saw was this. When we asked people about a hybrid model where kids are coming to school every other day, that one came in at 44%. And then we asked parents about a hybrid model where kids were coming in 2 days a week, but those days would be set. And the reason we asked about that was we wondered if it was going to make life easier for families if they knew the exact 2 days of the week on which their kids would be going to school. So say, for example, on Monday and Thursday, the green cohort would go. On Tuesday and Friday, the orange cohort would go, and everyone would have remote learning on Wednesday. Or maybe everyone is out on Monday for remote learning. Some kids come Tuesday, Wednesday, some kids come Thursday, Friday. At any rate, that model received 29.4% of the vote, and the remote learning model got 23.2%. When we asked families where they were going to have children next year, 417 of those families said they would have a Marathon child, 431 said they'd have an Elmwood child, and 400 said they would have a Hopkins child. All right, so let's talk about these three models, because I know this is probably the slide and a couple of other ensuing slides that are most important to all of you as viewers tonight, because I've received so many questions about this. I won't spend a lot of time on the full reentry model because that's not one that's quite on the table right now. But what would that look like? It would mean all the teachers came back to school. And honestly, we might have some teachers who would be required to teach remotely only because, those teachers might have, some kind of a health issue, right? But even with that full reentry model, what the commissioner has said, and I've bolded it for you over here, is that if any family would like to choose this in a full reentry model, if they wanted to choose remote instruction. So let's imagine 95% of the kids all came back in that full reentry model, but 5% of families said absolutely not. Most of our teachers would come back. Some of our teachers would teach remotely, and these would probably be our teachers who had an underlying health condition, so that we made that match in heaven. And then some of our teachers might have to have a split schedule. So let me explain that. When I say that some teachers might have to have a split schedule, let's imagine that we're talking 7th grade social studies teachers. And in the 7th grade, we had 100 kids that were assigned to one particular social studies teacher. 80 of those students were coming in together every single day in the full reentry model in school full time. But 20 of those kids were the kids in the 7th grade who said, I am not coming back. So out of our 300 students who are across the 7th grade, 20 of them have said, not comfortable with that. We would need a teacher for those 20 kids. So what we would like to do is have one of the 7th grade social studies teachers teach at 80% or 4 classes in school, and have one class that person is pushing out the learning remotely. And by that, we actually mean that they would be FaceTime with kids. So that particular teacher would have an 80-20 split, 80 in person, 20 remote. When we look at the scheduling of that, so students who would be choosing remote learning then, we would have to work with the district to develop your schedule. And I know people keep asking me about this. Well, will I get a Hopkinton Public Schools teacher? That would be our first hope, is that everybody could get a Hopkinton Public Schools teacher. But what I say in that right-hand column is that you can get a Hopkinton Public Schools teacher when that teacher is available and when the budget permits. So let's think about a time when it would be really, really hard to give a student a Hopkinton Public Schools teacher. So let's imagine that you have a student who is taking advanced placement chemistry. This is sort of my go-to example. And you decide that for your kiddo, you would prefer to have remote learning, even though all the other kids are back in school in this full reentry model. So if there are 96 students, say, for example, in classes of 24 that would have been in those AP classes, but 3 of them, say, decide that they want remote instruction, we can't pay a teacher to teach 0.2 to teach only 3 kids. So that would really mean what we were doing is paying 20% of a teacher's salary to teach only 3 children. That is just not cost effective across the district. And this is a year that we'll probably be paying for an awful lot of substitute teachers along the way. So the budget just wouldn't afford that. So what we would probably do with these 3 kids who are taking AP chemistry right here in this space is we would, put them on a virtual high school or a VHS class, or there's a similar product called Edmentum, and put them into that place. Those are the kinds of things that we're going to have to be able to do to be creative. So when people are saying, my gosh, why do I have to tell you what I'm doing by August 3rd? By the time we get all of these people situated in the right places with the right teachers, and this gives us additional time to set up schedules, we're going to be in a much, much better place. Now, let's go back to what might happen. Say we had 20 students who were all second graders, but we had a couple of teachers at the second grade level who said, I'm not going to be able to work this year. I need to take a leave of absence. I am really just not comfortable coming back in that building, given the fact that we are in a pandemic. So now at the second grade level, we're down 2 Hopkinton Public Schools teachers. In this situation, we may have to say that, we're hiring a long-term sub. Clearly, we are looking for a person who is highly qualified and credentialed to be maybe an in-person teacher, maybe a remote teacher. So I don't want this to sort of appear to be that we are penalizing kids who choose remote, but we have a much better chance of building cohorts with kids who are choosing in person, at least based on those preliminary percentages that you saw in the survey data. All right, so let's talk about the hybrid model. There are some really important things for you to know about the hybrid model. If we are using the hybrid model where we go A, B, or green day, orange day, green day, orange day, if I'm a green day student, I will be going to school on green days, and so will all of my siblings. It's sort of non-negotiable. We've got it all figured out so that families are either green day families or orange day families. This should help you with your scheduling. So imagine that I come to school on Monday, it's a green day, and I have in-person instruction with, for the most part, Hopkinton Public Schools teachers. On Tuesday, I will have at-home work to do. Now, some of the learning that I'll do will actually be new learning, but it won't be delivered to me face to face by a teacher. And that's because my teacher of record, whether it's in high school English class or a third grade classroom or a seventh grade pre-algebra class, my teacher of record is very busy teaching the orange cohort today. So that person can't be Zooming with me because she's working with them, or he's working with them. So what they will do is set up some kind of new learning for you in Schoology, or they will have sent you home with a bag of leveled readers, say, for example, from the Hopkins School. There is new learning there, but there will also be a homework component, right? So that's what kids are going to be doing on the off day when they have their home learning. Home learning in the hybrid schedule is very, very autonomous. In any one of these situations this year, students will be graded across the board. I keep getting questions. Will my child be graded? Will my child be graded? I don't want to say that families are, sort of still, feeling the sting of that from the spring. But yes, this year we are looking to engage our kids in real, solid, strong, full-time learning, whether you are choosing remote, hybrid, or full reentry. Now, I do need to be very clear that in this hybrid model, you have some teachers, again, who will not be coming to school. So again, the commissioner says that even though we have this hybrid model where kids are going to be coming into school and attending every single day, what the commissioner has said, if you have families who don't feel comfortable with that, they have the right to choose remote learning. So everything that we just said about remote learning over here in the full reentry model is true here in the hybrid model too. So for example, again, if you have that AP chemistry class and only you and 2 peers are looking for that course remotely, we may need to offer you online instruction. Now that's going to be pretty tricky, I think, if we have kids who say, well, I want to come back into the district. Once you are in that VHS online course, you're kind of staying in that VHS online course. And we'll talk about the grace period where you're able to sort of shift back and forth. But really, if you are in an online course, we may not have the same, sort of scope and sequence, right? So our course in AP chemistry might start with this and proceed to that, while the one that you're doing online may have taken a totally different, kind of course sequence. So what that would mean is you would be missing big pieces, or we may not have room for you actually in a course that's already set up at Hopkinton High School, because we develop our schedules based on student interest. So if we could put 24 kids in a science class, for example, and you want to come back in and be the 24th kid, 25th kid, that might not be possible for you. So we just want to make sure people are very much aware of that. At other levels, you may have a long-term substitute teacher if for some reason a Hopkinton Public Schools teacher is not working in the Hopkinton Public Schools this year. All right, and we are calling this remote learning model here the elected remote learning model, because we don't want it to get mixed up with the fully remote learning model. The fully remote learning model is not what we're looking at right now. That's the model where every single child in the town of Hopkinton, all 4,000 of you, are working from home. It's what we had last spring. Now, what people will ask me about that model, that fully remote model, as well as this elected remote model, is this: are we going to have more face-to-face time? What the Commissioner of Education has told us is that the answer to that question needs to be yes. The amount of time the kids spent on learning in the spring seemed to be okay. It was kind of, and I use this phrase frequently, but it was kind of, a Band-Aid on a bleeding jugular vein. We didn't really know what we were heading into with a pandemic. And we patched things as we could. This time we are planning very carefully for what September will look like. All right, so tell me about that elected remote learning. And elected remote learning, again, could be if we were going full-time, which we don't have on the table right now, but elected remote is sort of the counterpart to the hybrid model. All right, so whenever we can, as availability and as the budget affords us, we will put exceptional Hopkinton Public Schools teachers in front of students. And again, there may be a long-term sub, or there may be an online course, and those things could happen just because we have, our teachers moving in different directions, and because we may not have enough remote learning, elected remote learners to form what we're calling a cohort. 3 kids do not constitute a full class, so we would be putting a full teacher toward that group. We would be finding some alternative learning modality for them. Elementary students are going to get the same courses as their peers. So if you have a kiddo who's doing ELA in school, you'll get ELA at home. If you're doing math in school, you'll get math at home. And so, those core courses, as well as your specials or related arts, we're going to try to make them as similar as we can. But let's remember that when you are electing to learn remotely, the way we deliver instruction naturally will differ from what will happen if you are in the brick and mortar setting and you are face-to-face with a teacher every day. Our middle and high school students will get the courses that they have enrolled in. So people have emailed to say, hey, when we were in February, my kid chose Mandarin 3 and Honors American Literature and trigonometry. Will my child still be in those courses? And the answer is yes. So what we're trying to do, and I don't know that there is any course that has been canceled at the high school, but if that's what you chose, that's where you are. So I want people to stop worrying that somehow the schedule has been kind of dismantled while we've been out of school since March 10th. That is not the case. We are working with the Teachers Association to ensure that our kids have more face-to-face synchronous in-person hours of instruction in this elected remote hybrid model. The state has said, Commissioner Riley, that the learning hours in this elected remote instruction need to be comparable to a regular school day, regardless of the model chosen. So for those parents who are saying, oh, I don't know, should I elect remote? That's what I'd kind of like to do. Will it be comparable to what's happening in school? The commissioner says that it has to be comparable to a regular school day. All right, lessons in this model will be pushed out both synchronously, face-to-face, through a Zoom session, as well as asynchronously. We got a lot of feedback in the spring saying, you know what, sure, K to 5 or K to 3, we had Seesaw, and we always knew where to look for things. But when we got to the secondary levels, we felt like it was hard to kind of follow where things were because some teachers used Canvas and some people used Google Classroom and some people were Zooming and some people were sending email. And for the kids, really, it was tough to navigate. So the school district is investing in a learning management system, what we call an LMS, and it's called Schoology. It syncs with PowerSchool, it syncs with Zoom, so there would be one platform. So if I want to set up a Zoom meeting with my kids, they log into Schoology and just click on the Zoom link, and there it is. If I'm a teacher who loves to, create Google Docs and goes right in there. Your old Google Classroom slips right into Schoology. So all of these things will be there, and that is going out to grades 4 to 12. Seesaw will still be used by K to 3. So for all of you parents who are Seesaw experts, you are all set. And then number 6, the entire district needs to, if the entire district needs to switch to full remote instruction, kids are going to stay with their current teachers. So if you have chosen this elected remote model and your child's in a remote 4th grade classroom, for example, if everybody goes remote, your kiddo is going to stay put. Likewise, if your child is in a 4th grade in-person model, if we go to remote, your child is going to stay in with that class. So whoever was your teacher in school will become your remote teacher out of school in the event that we had to transition. Now, we love to build classroom communities. We love to establish relationships between peers and between peers and teachers. That's the reasoning behind doing this, in addition to not sort of creating chaos. All right, the flexibility of the elected remote. This is a really important slide for you people who are thinking about the elected remote instructional model. I keep getting this question over and over again. So if you are a family who on Tuesday says, we're choosing the elected remote, and it gets to be September 15th, all of our kids come into school. There is a delayed start this year by 10 days. The commissioner has reduced the number of days from 180 to 170. We are not certain what the first day will be, but let's just say for the sake of argument that it's about September 15th. All the kiddos come in, and in those first 2 weeks, you think, oh, we have made a grave, poor choice here. We've got to get out of this elected remote situation. We want to go to that, in-school hybrid every other day model. After those first 2 weeks, families are going to be able to make the choice to transition from the elected remote to hybrid, and also vice versa. You'd be able to go from hybrid to elected remote. So if you're thinking, I don't know, my child goes into that school every day and I'm just not sure about the social distancing and I'm very nervous about it, you can absolutely have your child transition out into the elected remote. So there's a nice little switcheroo that can happen round about October 1st. Now, after that, we are kind of limiting the days on which families are going to be able to transition. Yes, we want for you to be able to transition, but we can't have that kind of transitioning where a parent calls on, a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, and we've got kids coming into school and kids coming out of school. It just will never work in terms of being able to, arrange classes and follow those things. So we're thinking about 3 days. Please note that that says, for example. Those are just kind of thrown out there as these felt like logical dates on which you could make that kind of a switch. So the Monday after Thanksgiving, for example, might be a time to make a logical switch. And please remember that if you're taking an online course, you will not be able to sort of switch into a Hopkinton High School or maybe even middle school class, for instance. On January 2nd is another one of those days. So you come back after the new year, maybe the Monday after February vacation, and then switching up for the year has to be over. Once you've made it to February vacation, you are part of that classroom community, undoubtedly. All right, so let's talk about the hybrid instruction. Hopkinton Public Schools teachers will instruct our students in person. Now, let's imagine that we have a Hopkinton Public School teacher who cannot do that. For reasons of childcare, any of the aforementioned things that we've been talking about all evening, you may get a long-term sub in that situation as well. Our elementary students are going to get all of their typical courses, but if you are in school, The time that we would spend typically on like ELA or on math or on social studies or science, that would be ever so slightly reduced in time because we have to scheduling in hand washing and mask breaks. The school committee, some reentry folks today we actually did kind of a little run through at the high school. And by the time we had spent 45 minutes in a classroom, we were all ready to step outside and take our masks off in like the cool summer air. So that's what we had done this morning. And that's what you're going to see with your elementary kiddos is just a couple of times a day. Now, can recess be used for mask break? Yes. Can lunch be used for a mask break? Yes. Same thing for middle and high school. You'll be getting the courses that you enrolled in, but there will have to be some kind of alteration to what you currently know as a full class period because we have to build in transition time at the high school and we have to build in hand washing and mask breaks. Our kids in the hybrid model are going to be on the every other day, green day, orange day cycle. Students are going to learn in person in one day and at home on the following day. At-home learning days are going to be a combination of homework and new learning. You could get non-electronic materials pushed out, such as guided reading books, and those could be used alongside electronic materials. They will be pushed out asynchronously, and that will happen through Schoology, our new learning management system for grades 4 to 12. And during the in-school days, you will have mask breaks, you will have hand washing breaks. They're all built in, but the start and end times of your day remain unchanged. So if you're accustomed to the high school start time or the middle school start time or Elmwood start time, that's your start time, unchanged across 5 buildings. All right, what kind of flexibility is there in this hybrid model? All right, so the hybrid model is Hopkinton's chosen in-school model. It's the one we're going to begin school with in the fall, hopefully. If conditions worsen due to increased COVID cases, then the AB classes could turn fully remote on a dime. You'd still meet with your same teacher remotely. And this situation, it could be resolved per the Department of Public Health guidelines, or maybe it won't be. You could go into remote learning and stay there from, say, November to June. It's really hard to say. Contrastingly, if the trajectory of the virus improves markedly and the DPH folks and the state and local district medical professionals say, you know what, it's really safe now and you could bring kids in full time, maybe we could reduce that 6 feet of social distancing requirement at lunch and we could bring kids back full time and in person. Essentially, that hybrid model is the one we're going to start with, but there could be shifts either way. So that kind of constitutes the flexibility. You could go remote or you could go full in person. Oops. All right, now I will just zip through some frequently asked questions and then I will open up the opportunity for everyone out there to ask more frequently asked questions. All right, well, children who choose remote learning have Hopkinton High School, Hopkinton Public School teachers. And the answer to that, as you know, is any family who wants remote learning can opt for it, the elected remote model. The elected remote learners will have access to Hopkinton Public School teachers as we are able to schedule them and as the budget affords. Will there be improvements made to the remote instruction from what you knew last spring? And the answer is yes. We are purchasing a learning management system for grades 4 to 12. We're going to be training people to use it. And we are also providing remote learning professional development for faculty and staff. And we are committed to offering more time for the face-to-face remote learning instruction. Has any thought been given to other models, a week on, a week off, 1 week on, 2 weeks off? And yes, we did consider those by the week models, but they are largely medical models, and we preferred something that promoted more academic growth and achievement, even while being able to mitigate risks similarly. Can families switch from remote to in-person learning? Yes, but there are going to be preset dates on which children can make those switches. To allow switching at any time of year would be too chaotic. And in September, as you know, we will have a grace period. Are siblings going to be put into the same attendance groups? For example, will all siblings be on a green day or an orange day? The answer is yes, and that is not optional. So please don't say, but I'd really like one kid to be on the orange day and one kid to be on the green day. We really just cannot entertain those kinds of switches. Parents of multiples have asked us, can I change my request? Because in the spring, people who have twins and triplets will, make some kind of a choice, like I would like two kids to be together and one separate, or I never want my twins in the same classroom. At this point in time, our plan is to honor your original request. Unless you reach out with a new request in the coming week, we are going to keep with your original request. So please note that, parents of multiples. All right. Why are people talking about 3 feet and 6 feet of social distancing? I think this really kind of threw people. And to be honest with you, it was a little jarring, I think, to superintendents and educators and central office people around the state, because we anticipated 6 feet of social distancing in keeping with CDC guidelines. And when we learned that the American Pediatrics Association thought that 3 was okay, we were a little thrown. In Hopkinton, you should know we are committed to the 6 feet of social distancing in the classrooms. So, we were in a high school classroom today that had 13 desks in it. We were at greater than 6 feet there, although we can't say we're going to be greater than 6 feet everywhere. But I think people can tell you that sitting in those chairs, we all felt very comfortable and perfectly well distanced. Are we going to have training for use of PPE? And will all teachers have to go through that training, and will all students have to go through that training? Yes, Hopkinton Public Schools nurses will provide that training. When is school going to start? We're not exactly sure about that. The commissioner, as you know, has reduced the number of days that kids need to attend. Teachers will still need to attend 183 days, but kiddos are going 170 as opposed to 180. The 10 days that were granted for teacher preparation must be used before the start of the school year. So the question then becomes, would the district be using its 2 professional days before the start of the school year, or would we prefer to weave those through the remainder of the school year? All right, when are decisions going to be made? Parents are asked now to choose either remote or hybrid learning by August 3rd, 2020. And once we know the plans of our teachers and our students, we can begin to build schedules. Once again, I just want to reiterate, that is a really, really complex task, figuring out what we're going to do with 4,000 kids who have multiple teachers across this district. Are there going to be grades? Yes. While in the spring, the commissioner had indicated he did not want kids formally graded, but wanted them rated along a continuum of the degree to which they were meeting expectations. In 2021, kids are going to be earning grades, whether you are on the hybrid model, the elected remote model, whether we go to a full remote model, we are going to grade our students. And what will the schedule look like? We're going to schedule classes almost as we typically would. So if students are listening to this right now, and you can remember what it used to look like when you were in 4th grade last year and you're going into 5th, or what it looked like in 7th grade and you're going into 8th, these schedules are not going to be kind of far off the mark there, but there will be hand washing and mask breaks built in. What will specials and related arts look like? These courses will probably be delivered through the regular education classroom. We have guidance from the department on PE, chorus, and instrumental music. So we're going to have to determine how best to implement those courses in Hopkinton at 6 feet of social distancing. That could get a little bit tricky, but please know that we do value the related arts, and we will be ensuring that our kids are getting good art, music, physical education, library, wellness, all of those courses. Are students safe on the bus? I'm going to say that I would never tell any parent that their child is 100% safe in this pandemic, right? I can't say that kids are safe on the bus. But what we can say is that we've put into place ways to minimize contact on the bus with 26 riders. So the commissioner says we can put 26 kids on the bus. Each rider will be required to wear a mask. We have plexiglass face shields for each student. Originally, we were planning on having kids wear those face shields. And if we think that breathing is not a problem and we don't think that it should be, kids will be wearing masks and face shields. And that you should know, the bus driver will not be monitoring students for wellness. I don't want people to think that, because a kid got into the bus and, looks like he had the common cold, that it's the job of the bus driver to be looking for that. The bus driver is not a medical professional. The bus driver is hired to drive our buses. If parents need to drive their children, will traffic be a nightmare? And that's verbatim the question, nightmare. So what we're hoping is that with only 50% of the kids in attendance, that even if there is increased parent drop-off traffic, congestion won't be much worse than usual, which is admittedly pretty bad. You know, as the superintendent of the Hopkinton Public Schools, I'm not going to tell you that we don't have traffic congestion. We do. School administrators are going to be making adjustments to drop off and pickup routines so that, you know, we will try to be using multiple doors. So let's take the middle school, for example. If you have to do just very basic math, 900 kids, we cut that number in half and say we have 450 coming in a day. Now, what we'll try to do is have 150 use this door, 150 use that door, 100, just so that we are spreading kids out. So we will be making adjustments to drop off and pick up. People want to know, are we hiring extra buses? There are no additional buses to hire. People want to know, will there be bus monitors? We will try to hire for those positions, but I can tell you it will be very difficult to hire for those positions. We would need 31 people to agree to that. It's a split shift, so you're working part-time in the morning and part-time in the afternoon, which takes up your whole day. And every day you're getting into a bus in somewhat close contact with 26 students. So we'll see what we can do about that. What will happen if a student tests positive? So the commissioner has stated that at the elementary level, when or if a student tests positive, the entire classroom will go to remote learning. If that student travels on the bus, those students may also move to remote learning. And what will happen on the buses is students will have assigned seats, so we will know who sits around that student. When kids come into the buses, they will fill the back of the bus and then move this way toward the front, so that realistically, we shouldn't have kids even passing each other. When the bus stops at school, so kids can deboard, kids in the front seat will exit first, kids in the back seat will exit last. Families, will they be notified? Yes, families will be notified that their child has had exposure to a COVID-19 positive person. The district will work very closely with the Department of Public Health, school nurses, and the school physician on this. But you must remember that we will not ever divulge names of students who are COVID positive or who have, you know, even left the building for testing. What happens if there's an outbreak? Again, with communication to and approval from the commissioner, we can shut down a school. We could shut down several schools in our district. In that case, instruction in the Hopkinton Public Schools could become entirely remote. Could our current plan, the hybrid model, remote model, change? Yes, and I think I've said this one several times, so I won't repeat this one. But that's why we're sending in that document to the commissioner, so he knows we have a plan. Is there a chance that students would not advance a grade level this year? We have heard nothing to that effect yet. And we say yet because the trajectory of the virus could dictate a different answer to this question, but I can tell you truly, we have not heard anything about kids repeating a year of school. Why do you need to make a binding decision by August 3rd? I think I've explained this one very clearly, but I'll say it again. Making these schedules is going to be exceedingly challenging. And what happens if an individual student has to quarantine? So people keep asking, what if a student gets sick? What if he has to quarantine? What if he tests positive? We could add a student, say, for example, to one of the elected remote classes temporarily. We might have to provide assignments for that student to complete independently at home, pushed out either through like Seesaw or the learning management system. We may be able to find a faculty member, one who is teleworking, and that person could be sort of the curriculum curator temporarily for remote kids. Those are the things that we are thinking about now if a student, an individual student, not an entire class, had to quarantine. And so at this point, I will stop sharing my screen and we will entertain the questions that have gone into the chat. And I'm sorry to have taken so long, a whole hour with just unbroken talk.
Thank you, Dr. Kavanaugh. Please take a drink of water. Have a breath for a moment. We have probably, I want to say we have about 225 questions, maybe a little bit more, to be honest. So we're going to do our best between now and about 9:15 to see where we can get. And I'm just going to take them in order. We don't have any other way to quickly collate them.
Mhm.
So if you're ready for rapid fire,
I am.
I'm assuming that you can then redirect to your esteemed panel of experts who are here with you. So, okay. So first question that we got on chat was regarding the grading for seniors. It is, how will the GPA for the second semester of the seniors' junior year be handled for rising seniors in the high school?
You know what, I'm going to let that person reach out to Mr. Bishop because I know that last year he had developed a means to sort of bump up in those first, couple of months of school, kids' GPAs in some percentage, and I don't quite remember what that is. So he's the expert, and I will defer to him.
Okay. Oh, I should read the name. That was from Val Foti, and I apologize to everyone if I mispronounce your name. Let's see. So we had from Jill Selleck. Why were on the grid, the colored grid? Why were there no concern cells on fully remote for all, not marked as green color? In my opinion, if it is not a concern, it should be marked as green.
Yeah, certainly, that could have been, marked as green, I guess. I wouldn't say that not having to employ transportation is, ideal. It's just kind of neutral. It's kind of a non-entity. But, certainly we could call that ideal. But I guess if our job as a public school district is to educate, the fact that the instructional and social emotional box was red was one that gave folks on the reentry committee and our administration and teachers some pause.
Mike O'Toole asks, since schools were closed in March, nothing has changed with the virus. Expecting children and teens to wear masks and social distance is not realistic. If school isn't fully remote in the fall, how can you reassure families and teachers that any other plan will be safe?
And again, I want to be very clear that I will never say to any parent that we are putting your child into a safe place, especially in a pandemic when we're bringing kids into our public schools. What we are looking at is satisfying the wishes of both groups of families. Some people want remote instruction, but some people would like for their kids to actually be in school face to face with a teacher. So what we have in terms of this hybrid model is something that we believe mitigates risk. If the CDC says 6 feet, we're adhering to 6 feet. If the CDC says masks, we have masks. If they say wash your hands and use hand sanitizer, we've built those in there. So all of those kinds of things that the CDC has recommended, we feel like we have in place. People have been able to practice those things and be successful in going to other jobs or going to the grocery store or going into a mall. So we think that mitigating that kind of risk, we are, hoping to be able to educate our kids in the best way we know how, which we believe is face to face.
Okay. From James Borzamato, how are you able to serve lunch at 6 feet in the hybrid model, but can't in the full-time model? Aren't the cafeteria dimensions going to be the same regardless?
Yes, that is true. But what if we had the full-time model where everybody was coming to school, we would have, say, 1,200 students in the high school. If we go to the hybrid model where kids are in attendance only every other day, we reduce 1,200 students to 600 students. So once we lower our numbers, then we can, easily spread our kids out. So that's a good question because I know that can be confusing.
Thank you. Yes, there was so much information, I know. And I should say, I should have said this before, we are going to pull out questions and answers and put up frequently asked questions. Hopefully tomorrow that will be distributed, if not by Monday, for sure on the website. But we know there are so many questions out here. So let me just move on. Chris Bullock says, did you say the AB model means that kids go 3 days one week and then 2 days the next week, or 2 and 2 with everyone at home on Friday? Also, did you consider a model where the A's always do Monday, Wednesday, and the B's always do Tuesday, Thursday? I think you spoke to this, but
Yes. So the answer to the latter question was yes, we did consider that, having 2 days in, 2 days in, and then one day where everyone is remote. But I did say that with the AB model, kids would be coming to school 3 days one week and 2 days the next. Now, the difference between those two models is this: if I'm coming every Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, everyone's remote. In a 10-day period, I, as a student, would come Monday, Tuesday, the first week and Monday, Tuesday, the second week. So I'd be coming 4 days out of 10. If we use the AB model and I come Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, now I'm coming 5 days out of 10. So essentially, what was a full school year is only reduced sort of by 50% face to face as opposed to 60% face to face. So we were really just trying to maximize face to face time and increase continuity day to day.
We had a similar question from Ron Pryfer, who said, what has been mentioned is an AB model, whether alternate days or alternate weeks. Was an ABC model analyzed, dividing the cohort into thirds and doing 1 week on, 2 weeks off, I think.
Yes, so we thought about that and we thought that 2 weeks off was an awfully long time. So if we were skeptical about kids leaving on a Friday and coming back 10 days later on a Monday, we really wondered what it would look like if our kids were off school for, what would be like 17 days. I mean, that just felt like an awfully long time to kind of navigate independent learning, or, maybe even if you had a little bit of face-to-face time in Zoom, it would still feel like an awfully long time to be out of the building. And for a lot of our kids, I should say this too, the social, emotional, behavioral, those kinds of pieces, mental health, they feel great comfort being in our schools. We were with a couple of high school students today, and one said on her way into the high school that she feared this might be the very last time she ever steps into her high school. And when she said that, I think we all got very emotional. I mean, it would be very difficult, I think, to sever kids from a place where they find comfort.
Okay. So I have a question here for lunch. Will the kids be able to choose who they eat with, or will that be assigned?
So kiddos are going to be assigned to the same spot at lunch every single day. And, again, that makes it very easy. So if every day I sit next to you, Mrs. Fargiano, and, I get diagnosed as COVID positive, right? Because I've been eating lunch next to you every single day, the DPH is going to reach out to you immediately and say, hey, you have been within 6 feet without a mask on of a COVID positive person. So that's a really nice way for us to be able to give families really good data, through the public health system. And, it also gives, kids that one spot that is kind of theirs. There may be places where after a month's time, we say, yep, we can switch this out and kids can, move to a different model for a month. But we really feel like having that consistency is critical in a pandemic.
Here's another question. If you have more than one child attending different schools that have the same start time and are dropping both kids off, will there be adjustments made for drop-off times? How are you accommodating for more vehicles for personal drop-off? And there have been a lot of questions around traffic patterns, drop-off, navigating one school and another school. This came up at office hours as well.
Sure. Yes, we understand that if you are a parent who is willing to drop off your child, and the schools that would be, I think impacted by this are obviously, Marathon and Elmwood. The parent will just need to sort of choose which one of those schools that he or she will go to first, and then which one they'll go to second. But in the same kind of a question, when people said, "Are you going to relax your absenteeism standards?" We are certainly willing to work very carefully with parents to say, yep, this is the kiddo who gets here like 5 minutes later than some of the others. And, when kids come on buses to our schools, the buses are often, sort of staggered in their arrival. So it may be even unnoticeable. Honestly, it could be unnoticeable.
Switching gears to cleaning, more details around the cleaning of the schools, like what chemicals are you going to use and what is the frequency?
Okay, so I can be, very clear about that. We have those electrostatic, well, and maybe because Tim Person is on the call, I'll have him talk about the electrostatic spray guns, and then he can also talk about the frequency with which, we'll be doing touch points in bathrooms.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So we've been actually looking into how we're going to clean the schools for quite some time now. And we've come up with, I think, a pretty good program. So when Dr. Kavanaugh mentions the Protexis spray guns with the Pro Tabs that we are using, we've actually been using that product since 2017. We brought it in to help with our flu, or when a classroom kind of gets. We notice a lot of kids in a classroom getting sick. So luckily enough, we were ahead of the curve to a lot of other districts when we were buying this product, and we just really ramped that up. So that's a really a key tool that we'll be using throughout the day to clean up bathrooms, help disinfect areas, high touch points, doorknobs, handles, push points, and so on and so forth. The cleaning products that we'll use, the frequency that we'll clean is, again, every couple of hours in the bathroom during the school day, a deep clean every night, cleaning and disinfecting of all the classrooms every night. The products that we will use are all school safe products that we will continue to use and wipe down surfaces during the evenings and do kind of our regular, ramped up, but our regular cleaning routines.
Okay,
Did that answer it? I hope.
I think you did great.
I
Thank
think
you.
so.
I like turning to the expert.
Okay, so for the days the children are in school, will they have pre-assigned seating?
Absolutely.
Again, contact tracing purposes and so forth, right?
Yes.
As well as on the buses.
As well as on the buses. Yes, I should have said that as well. Thank you.
Okay. What is the plan if there's an outbreak of illness? The flu season inevitably will come, and COVID will complicate things with the air hand dryers. Or will the air hand dryers be removed? Those can spread disease. I think
We are, and maybe Tim could talk to this one too, but we are, reinstalling paper towel dispensers in all of those bathrooms. So, I know that that's a concern for parents. Tim, I don't know if you want to add something to that?
Sure. So I'll just say that the CDC was allowing us to use hand dryers through the pandemic. I think the theory is that if you've washed your hands correctly for 20 seconds under the sink when you're going to the hand dryer, your hands should be clean. We as a district decided that using paper towels and following more the DESI guidelines on this one, we decided going to paper towels would be a better option and hopefully put parents and children's minds at ease.
All right. It feels like there was another part of that question, Amanda, was there?
it was about removing the hand dryers, which I think we're going to paper towels. Did you say that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
So
thought there was something right before that.
just an outbreak because flu season is on the horizon.
Oh, I see. Right.
And we could be
Yes.
an outbreak.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, for people who haven't been following closely, I think the reason you went through the three models is because we are required to plan for all three models, and we may be required to shift gears and go fully remote if conditions merit because of a new outbreak and so forth. So that's why all the planning and why all the discussion on all the different models, even though the recommendation is hybrid.
Yes.
Yep.
And when we make those decisions, we make them with DESI, we make them with the DPH, we make them with our local nurses, Dr. Boder, who's our school physician. Everybody's involved.
Okay. Okay, this is a little long. Regarding the hybrid model, Dr. Kavanaugh explained the difficulty of week on, week off. There were two other hybrids proposed. One was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Monday, etc. The other was dedicated days, always Monday, Wednesday, or always Tuesday, Thursday. The second hybrid model is much easier to remember, plan, and schedule ahead for working parents. Why did the committee decide on the first hybrid option? We can touch on that, but maybe to reiterate.
Yes. So one of the things that was a little less desirable about that is that you'd only be going to school 40% of the time rather than 50%. But what we did was we put out a survey because that was super important to the elementary scheduling committee. We really spent an awful lot of time on that. There was a lot of pushback, a lot of dialogue. And when we put that survey out, it turned out that the AB every other day model was sort of the winner for parents. The other thing that people had asked me to do, so I should mention this right now as well, they wondered, would the sort of major child cares, so Kids Grow, the YMCA, be willing to take kids on an every other day basis? They thought that might be a little bit unorthodox. But in talking to the director of the Y and in talking to the director at Kids Grow, they are very willing to have families in on Tuesday, Thursday, kids full time from 8 to 5 or whatever on 2 days of the week, and then the opposite on 3 days of the week. And they are also very willing to think about how to help kids do their at-home learning.
And do you know if communication has been available to families from those organizations yet? I know that was a question that was asked.
We can certainly get that out to families. I know that Mrs. Rothermick spoke to Kidsborough today, and I spoke to the Y the other day. And the Y is, getting together just, some leaflet, flyer, pamphlet, so parents can understand what's available to them. And Kidsborough, I'm sure, will do the same.
Okay. And parents can call, I'm sure.
Absolutely, yes. Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Moving on. And Nancy, I know you have a 50 to 100 text questions, so I don't want to ignore those. You want to
I
in one of
believe
those?
I am about up to 100 at this point. I'll do a few of mine. I question about kindergarten. Will kindergarten students be expected to attend remote learning sessions on their off days? If parents must send their kindergarten students to daycare on these off days, will the child be considered absent from school if unable to attend remote learning sessions in a daycare setting? It seems as though parents should be able to decline remote sessions for this age group. And just related also to kindergarten was a question about why we had opted to go to masks for children younger than the second grade, and concerned that that would not be practical. So I will group both those together.
Okay. So there is evidence that kids under second grade can wear masks. And, as people have been asking, do you think it's really safe to bring children into the building? We feel like if we have every kid, from K to 12 wearing masks, we are mitigating risk. And that's the whole game here, is mitigating risk. That's really important. As for the parent who asked about kindergarten in Massachusetts is not mandatory. So if this particular parent wants their child to come on the on days and none of the at-home work gets done, that's going to be okay. We want families to be able to do what is sort of like in the constraints of the law and things that they are okay and comfortable with. And I don't know if Mrs. DeVoe wants to jump in on that answer, because that's right in her wheelhouse.
Well, I would say going into it this round, we have much more information than in the spring, where we had those broad categories for grading, and it was participate and do the work, you partially met, you didn't meet. So here, keep in mind that, as Dr. Kavanaugh said, we're grading students. We do have a curriculum and standards. So even though it's not required, the state gives us standards, and it would be graded on what your child is able to complete and show. That being said, families make the decision that works for you. This is really tricky. Our teachers are going to teach. We're going to have lessons on in-person days, work to do at home. It would not necessarily mean screen time the entire day. Some of it would be learning lessons, learning activities, that's engagement in learning. But we agree that it is not age appropriate for a child to be on a screen for 6 hours. So that's not what we're looking to do. So that's kind of a roundabout answer. So I hope it helps, but I know it may not, because there's still a lot of questions.
Yes, and I'll say one more time. I know that I've said this once already, but if you are sending your kid out to Kidsborough or the Y, they are committed to helping with the at-home instruction on the off days for hybrid kids.
So I had a couple of questions that were similar, so just wanted to kind of combine them together. Question is, are these models yet supported by the Teacher Association, and when what data do we have from teachers regarding percentages that may or may not be coming back, if any?
Our HR department has reached out to all of Hopkinson's employees, central office employees, paraprofessionals, cafeteria workers, all of the Hopkinton Public Schools teachers, and asked the question about coming back. And do you think that you might qualify for under ADA because you have an underlying health condition? Do you think that you have childcare difficulties? And so we have that data right now, and we are working obviously on a case-by-case basis with the teachers to determine what education for them will look like next year, in the same way that we're working with scheduling all of our kids. So in terms of the negotiations that we have with the Teachers Association, we have met a few times. We both at this point have, things on the table that are important to us. And I am personally positive about all of the interactions and the communications that we've had in the work that we're doing together. But to answer the question, has any of this been ratified formally yet? The answer is no.
Another question, but this one regarding PPE. Will the kids wear PPE suits? If the school doesn't provide, as parents, can they send kids with additional PPE?
Yeah, we would have no problem with that. We, obviously have masks and shields for kids. We would expect that parents are providing masks, but in the event that, a child has forgotten a mask or a broken mask, we are certainly going to provide them. But if there are other things, like if parents feel like it's very important for them to, have their kids come in, kind of the collared button down long sleeve shirt, so it's not even a shirt that would have to be pulled over your head but could be removed that way, right? Those are the kinds of things that we are absolutely in favor of. That's perfectly fine.
Nancy, could I jump in with a question?
Yep,
And then I
go
want
ahead.
to pass. Meg is also getting some questions. So I have a question about two children in middle school, both have IEPs. If we opt for the in-school option, do they have to go full time, or could they opt for the hybrid?
That is a wonderful question. I'm thrilled that someone has asked that because we haven't talked about it yet. So, as you know, if you are defined by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education as a high needs kiddo, so you are a student on an IEP, an English language learner, or somebody economically disadvantaged, you qualify to come into our buildings every single day if that's what you want to do. Under no circumstances will we compel people to do that. So if you are a student who has the opportunity to do it, but you say, you know what, I really just want to be like all of my peers and have my hybrid day in person and then my outside home learning day, you are welcome to do that as well. So the big district survey will go out. And then in the letter I sent to families the other day, I did indicate that Dr. Zaleski will be sending a survey from Student Services. And Jennifer Suker, who is our new Director of English Language Acquisition and Equity, she will be sending one out to the other students. So families who qualify for that will have the opportunity in a survey to say yes or no. And I understand that some people don't want to do that because they feel like they are exposing their child to more students and therefore increasing their levels of risk. Some of them, might have a younger sibling that they want that child to babysit for. So we are certainly not compelling. That was a great question. Thank you.
And a follow-up to that one, we were being asked, what would learning look like for a child with special needs on an IEP if we choose virtual learning?
So I would really feel better if Dr. Zaleski answered that question. So that one I think or, Dr. Zaleski and our building principals. But what I can say is, and Betsy DeVos has said this, that any child on an IEP is entitled to those services. So whatever the services are on the child's IEP, those are the services that will, need to be delivered. We will have to find a way, whether it's in person or remote. And
Meg, do you have any questions to add to
I
that?
didn't know if Mrs. Bilella wanted to chime in on that one because I know that's a topic that she's also pretty expert in.
No, I thought you did a really good job. I think we've been working actively with our team chairs and even special educators, even during the summertime when they're off, lots of conversations and building schedules to collaborate and figure that out, looking at students' IEP delivery needs. And we will meet their needs wherever they are, whether the family chooses for health reasons to stay home full-time, or if they're looking for the hybrid model and really would like to stick with one cohort, or if they come back full-time. That's our job, is to educate them all.
I just wanted to ask a question I'd been sent. How can parents of students on IEPs or 504s be expected to make a binding decision without the input of their students' team and service providers, which was also accompanied by the question, can we have a Zoom office hour with Dr. Zaleski tomorrow? Because the binding decision is due Monday. So let's just call her.
Well, I will say that Dr. Zaleski would not be available tomorrow for a phone call. Dr. Zaleski has a vacation day tomorrow. But we will certainly entertain those kinds of questions. And when we say binding decision, we're really thinking about remote or hybrid. So the question really is, do you want to have your child home or do you want to have your child in school? And so the second part of that about every day, that question comes later. So if there's somebody who is really deeply disturbed about that, that person should absolutely email Dr. Zaleski, and I'm sure that she will get back to the family that has that worry. She's
And
very good about
Dr.
responding.
Kavanaugh, I also think it's important to reiterate that you mentioned that there are periods of time where families can make
Yes.
changes. So I think that's important to remember as well. So I believe I saw a comment in one of the chats asking about that. If you get into a flow and realize, you know, you wanted to make a change as a special education parent, as you're working with a team, that's also an opportunity. And that's one of the reasons we've built in those opportunities for families to make changes, even though as administrators, that's going to be another whole set of Tetris pieces to jumble up.
Meg, did you have anything else you wanted to add, or? Okay. All right. Let's see, for in-person learning, there's a lot of added costs to add janitorial staff, PPEs, et cetera. Given that, how come adding teachers for remote learning is considered not cost effective?
No, we would be adding teachers for remote learning, absolutely. But what we're talking about is, you know, if you had a cohort of 20, you'd have to hire a teacher, but we would not hire a teacher for 3 students. So I get maybe what this person is kind of getting at, but there is a good alternative. You know, it's a fine alternative to say that we're going to have students take a VHS course, that it would be more cost effective to the district.
Okay, so here's another question. On homeschool days, and I appreciate the person used the right terminology. That's impressive. On homeschool days, is there an option for the kids to get help or ask questions from a teacher?
I would say that the answer to that is yes, but they're going to have to do that electronically.
Okay, like office hours or
Yeah.
sort of
Or,
thing.
you know, I put something into Schoology and I get an answer back.
Okay. There's a whole breadth of questions about faculty and staff, which you've started to address. Just to reiterate, there are lots of questions about how do the teachers feel, what percentage of the faculty will come back, is there a threat of a strike? There are a whole bunch of questions along these lines, just not knowing where teachers are in this whole process. So
Right. And you know what? I think that that's one of the reasons why the August 3rd date is so important to us, because once we start to look at the kids' needs, then we can say to teachers, these are the kinds of things that, you know, we need for you to do. You know what I mean? So when people say how many people are coming back, it's really hard to know that answer until we know what, you know, teacher needs and kid needs look like. You know, what happens in HR is this: when a teacher says, you know, I feel like it would be a risk for me to come back, we engage in interactive dialogue with the teacher to take a look at, you know, what are your needs, what are our needs, what could be an accommodation. And, you know, sometimes that accommodation is the just right fit. You know, oh, you're right, you shouldn't come back, but if you can teach 4th grade remotely, that's what we're looking for. So those questions that I think people would like answers to, we would like those answers to. We don't have them right now, but we won't till kids make choices.
here's one I think probably a lot of parents are feeling like this. Can you give an option, I think opinion, where school decides to provide the best education? Currently, it seems like the entire decision is on the parent, not the teacher assigned. So I think this person's looking for, what do we think is best in general for kids? I think you've come up with hybrid learning for a good reason. You know, but I think they're looking for professional opinion. Tell them what to do.
Well, you know, again, I go back to one of those very first slides where the cells were colored red and green. Now, if we had full in-person instruction, full-time like education like we used to know it, that I think would be the ideal model, but that one's not available to us. I am a true believer that what happens in a classroom with teachers and kids is the very best thing. But I also realize that families have needs and they have concerns and there are health issues in different families. So remote might be the right thing for a particular family. I think every family's got to kind of look at themselves and say, what are our needs individually, which is why the commissioner gives us that opportunity to choose either one.
And someone has asked, can we consider the school district starting out as entirely remote for 4 to 6 weeks so we can see if there's an increase in COVID cases in other school districts?
The reason I think I'm reluctant to start out remote is that by the time we go through 6 weeks, if we are starting in mid-September, we would be looking at coming in person like around November 1st. And typically that's when you start getting into that. The days are getting colder, cold and flu kind of season. I think it would be a missed opportunity to bring kids in to get to know their teachers. Last March, when we went out because of the pandemic, at that point in time, kids knew their teachers, teachers knew their kids. So there was still a familiarity and a lovely community, even if like everybody was kind of trapped in these Zoom sessions. If we're trying to build community in a on screen kind of a way in September, it will be a whole lot more challenging than if we have sort of that nice warm dialogue, I can see your face in a classroom, and we build community that way. So it would be nice for people to get to know each other sort of visually, physically kind of thing before we went out. That said, to be very fair to this asker, a teacher's going to be with the green cohort and the teacher's going to be with the orange day cohort. So these two cohorts, in the event that we go remote, will mingle for the first time really in the electronic arena.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Someone asked, why can't remote students just tune into the classroom sessions of the full students? In other words, remote teach and classroom at the same time.
One of the things that would require then is that the teacher kind of live stream. And we're obviously not going to take video of all of the kids in that classroom while the teacher is teaching. So we would kind of keep the camera on the teacher. So it keeps the teacher sort of affixed to that one space. But I'm going to be very honest in this venue right now, and I know people don't like to hear this, but across Massachusetts and across the country, what has happened with Zoom sessions in this pandemic is that people have recorded teachers saying things and taken those things sometimes out of context. And realistically, I don't think teachers would feel comfortable with that. And honestly, I understand their discomfort based on, nationally and locally and statewide things that have happened in terms of recording. Now we know that recording those sessions isn't actually legal, but people go ahead and do it, and it becomes really uncomfortable. I don't want to ask teachers to do something that would be uncomfortable for them or that could end badly in a Zoom session for a lot of people.
You're muted.
You're muted. Are you trying to, you look like you're trying to talk.
Sorry, yes. Nancy, did you want to interject here? I don't want to forget the text questions.
Yeah, I actually, they continue to roll in. Will the Hopkinton Public Schools publish the full curriculum for remote versus hybrid model so we can make an informed decision? In addition to child safety, this will also be an important criteria to make a decision. A couple of similar questions. Will the grading be the same or different for the remote versus the hybrid instruction?
So the curriculum should be the same. And I think that we had talked about that on one of those slides. So if, for example, our second grade students are learning particular skills in ELA, if the in-person kids are learning that, the remote kids should be learning that. right? So they should absolutely, if we have students who are, and even when we get down to the question about AP chemistry, it's not cost effective, but it's not the Hopkinton Public Schools so much that dictate that curriculum as it is the College Board. So when a remote teacher who works for VHS is teaching something like AP chemistry, the curriculum has been given to that person, right? And the people who are teaching in VHS are highly qualified public school teachers somewhere. So, kind of what we're talking about there is that, yeah, the curriculum should be the same. Now, will all of the assessments be the same? Probably not, right? Because there are some assessments that we can conduct in person, and there are some assessments that you cannot conduct, remotely. So in the event that, say, for example, in the fourth grade, we gave kids a, pencil paper test, or, we asked kids to, I don't know, like to sit and write some kind of an essay with a partner in class. The partner essay could happen outside of school, but maybe instead of taking a pencil paper test, we would ask kids to do something project based. So either way, the assessments are going to be ways for kids to show what they know and are able to do. But they may vary slightly in terms of assessment, but yes, our kids will get grades, and those assessments should measure the learning and should be reflective of what a child knows, whether in school physically or being taught remotely.
Question on bus fees. Will they be refunded if people opt for remote learning? If they've already.
Absolutely. If you have paid your bus fee, just call the transportation department and you will get your money back.
Question about if people are unhappy with that have chosen remote learning or even the hybrid model, are they able to change and opt for homeschooling at any point?
Anyone across the state of Massachusetts can absolutely opt for homeschooling whenever they would like to. There's an online form, and the person who governs homeschooling for the Hopkinton Public Schools is Assistant Superintendent Jennifer Parson. So if you reach out to Mrs. Parson, she can get everybody sort of all set and ready to go.
Nancy, I can
So,
sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. Do you
I was
want to go
gonna say,
ahead?
I just have a whole bunch of questions that are kind of getting around the same point of how do we calculate 170 days in a hybrid model? I think there's confusion about the home learning days counting as days, and that being actually content rich. And how do we actually deliver the curriculum and get the learning accomplished with an on-off model?
So the Commissioner of Education would say that if you are using a hybrid model and you have some in-person days and then new learning is pushed out asynchronously using a learning management system, that both of those days count toward the 170 days. If people, and this might be sort of like a little bit of schema that you can kind of hang your thinking on, if you have taken an online college course, so it's module 1 and you open it up and it asks you to read this passage and to respond to this passage in this particular way. That's the kind of independent learning that people will do. Or you might go into your chemistry course and watch an online video and then practice some kind of problems that when you go back tomorrow in person, you'll work on again. With the video, you can watch that video 5, 6, 7 times. And if you're still struggling, you can reach out to a course partner. So we'll even kind of set those things up. So we are hoping that it will be content rich. We are doing an enormous amount of professional learning this summer. And when people come back over the 10 days, and we will also make sure that people feel comfortable with using Schoology. Schoology is almost intuitive, so that it will help people to get better, we think, at the asynchronous remote assignments and new learning.
Thank you. This might be a good time to interject just a little commentary on our little walkthrough today.
Yeah.
Because there's so many questions about the hybrid model and what it feels like, and is there merit to being in one day and then you're off another day, and so we had a group of about 12 or so people participate today in a walkthrough in 2 different kinds of class instruction. One was a secondary model that Dr. Kavanaugh taught on the Scarlet Letter, and the other one was more around circle time in an elementary model that Ms. Parson taught us. And we went into class, we sat at our desks, we were masked. I had a lot of skepticism myself about whether or not I could think beyond the mask. Could I actually engage with people? Could I engage with learning? And it was a really positive experience. I mean, I think Meg and Nancy were both there, and Mrs. Dubois. I think we can all kind of share our unique takeaways. But what I took away, I think, most from the experience was really something that one of the students who participated said. And what she said is that when asked, well, the two students, one was asked and said, "What did you think?" And he said, "Well, it was kind of like a regular school day, but there were fewer kids." And that's actually true. It's a very low teacher student ratio, which felt on the student end, being a student in this class, it felt great to have fewer kids with one teacher. The other student said that she was really afraid that she would feel isolated behind all the PPE and wouldn't be able to connect emotionally with people in the classroom. And especially after we went through circle time, it really felt like a regular circle time, like we were building community, we were sharing things about ourselves, we were laughing. And the value of that sort of belonging and connection, in addition to the academics, for me, made certainly made it certainly was safety wise extremely doable, well handled. And Mr. Person has done an excellent job of spacing the desks and providing hand sanitizer, and we have sinks and whatnot. But it made it so important to have that connection so that on the off days, so in our model, Dr. Kavanaugh assigned us Scarlet Letter material for the off days and reading and assessment and so forth that we had to do. And it it felt like real school because you were connected to a class of people and you knew that one day off you'd go back and you'd see those people again. To me, it felt um, like a really positive model in the middle of a pandemic. Is it an ideal model? Would I love to be there every day? Yes. But it felt like a really good model for us, given where we are with our data in Hopkinton and Massachusetts, and from our ESY program, our YMCA program, and all of the summer program that Parks and Rec have done using the same kind of safety measures, and we've had no cases. I mean, to me, the whole combination of factors and the experience today, which I was very dubious about, really kind of sold for me the real benefit of the hybrid model. And I don't know if Meg or Nancy or Mrs. Dubois, if anyone wants to chime in on your own takeaways.
I'd like to jump in and say what especially surprised me was that even though we were all wearing masks, we could hear each other clearly. And I even forgot I was wearing a mask. I got so involved in the subject matter. And, there's just nothing to replace that electricity of the classroom. And we had that today. And I felt incredibly safe. I have asthma. I've got a kid with an immune disorder, but I felt perfectly safe in that room. And we have taken such precautions to ensure people's health and safety. And as Dr. Kavanaugh says, we can't ensure it's going to be perfect, but boy, are we doing a great job with it. And I think that whether we have a remote or a hybrid program, it's going to be good because this is Hopkinton. We have an excellent district. We don't produce poor products, so to speak.
And I can say going in, as Amanda and Meg mentioned, you're thinking about your PPE and what you're wearing, but as you're engaged in the lesson, that's the focus. So it was a true learning experience. And we were treated as if we were students. So we were all reading the Scarlet Letter, working on work. Dr. Kavanaugh was our English teacher. And we were engaged and focused. And that's where our mind was, not on, I'm sitting away from friends, I've got a mask on. And I think that's our goal with our learning, is that our learning and engagement is the priority and focus in the rooms, despite all of the other guidelines that we're adhering to. Yes, we were 6 feet apart. Yes, we took mask breaks. Yes, it wasn't get up and get a whatever in the room when you needed it. There were directions, as we do anytime with young children, give those guidelines. This is how we are going to do morning meeting. This is what you do when it's time to line up. And it's just part of that direction. And it flowed very well. And the time actually flew by. I mean, maybe an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes. We were engaged from a bus to the classroom, to the break, to leaving, but it went by very quickly.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to share that because we hadn't had a chance. I'm not sure we're going to get to it in this long list of questions, but I wanted to make sure that people knew that a bunch of people walked through this. And as a teacher, you also walk through it as a teacher trying to teach through a mask, and where, there might be concerns of, well, can I hear? Can I pay attention? It kind of seemed to become normal after about 5 minutes, which I was really surprised. So I just wanted to share that for people who are listening. And I'm sure any of us would answer questions if you want to email separately. Okay, back to the list, and we have so many questions. We are definitely going to have to, we have about 15 minutes left, and we're going to have to pull a lot of these into FAQs, I believe.
Amanda, can I interject just a sec?
Please.
I've seen there's a ton of questions about the remote learning stuff, and there's about, we're saying 10 to 35% of families may choose that. So I was wondering if we could address a few of those, because people are asking, would the schedule be the same as the AB schedule, or would it be 5 days? How often would they get, a Hopkinton school teacher? So there's a lot of detailed questions going on that perhaps Dr. Kavanaugh could address.
Yes, so if you are doing the remote learning 5 days a week, yes, you will be face to face with a teacher every single day. If that's sort of what people are looking for, that's what the plan is. So it's not like you have a teacher on Monday and then you're on your own on Tuesday. You'd have a teacher every single day of the week. Now, I think the answer to the question is also one that's developmental, because while a first grader might have a morning meeting and an ELA lesson and then sign off to do a little bit of work, but then kind of come back and do some math and then maybe some social studies and then sign off and then come back and have a related darts. It might extend the same period that a regular school day would, from say 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock at the Marathon Elementary School. But we can't take a 6-year-old and put that child in front of a screen all day long. So we come on, we go off, we come on, we go off. Now, I'll be perfectly honest, if you are choosing remote instruction and your kiddo is, 5 or 6, there's going to never be a model where a kid can do that sort of independently. But if you're choosing that for, your 7th grader, for example, and your 7th grader is, engaged from, the time that you would start the day at 7:30 to 2 o'clock. And again, not sitting in front of that screen all day long, but certainly would have in-person synchronous learning with a teacher, all day, really, not continuously, but in that period from 7:30 to 2. And as I said before, whenever possible, you can have a Hopkinton Public School teacher. So again, going back to the 7th grader that we were just talking about, if there are 15 7th graders who are all doing remote learning, that person, we could probably take a Hopkinton Public School teacher and have that person teach 20% of her time remotely and 80% of her time in person. When we were talking about those first graders a moment ago, if we have a teacher at the elementary level who says, I can't come back to school because I have an underlying health condition, even if that teacher is a 3rd grade teacher, we might say, well, we're going to have to take your assignment, make it something a little different this year. Now, all of our teachers highly qualified, credentialed to teach from K to 5. So moving the 3rd grade teacher to 1st grade, while it's not that perfect match, would certainly be an okay thing to do. So I don't want people who are thinking about remote instruction to say, oh, I'll never get a Hopkinton teacher. That's not necessarily true, but we will never know those answers until we know what kids want. And that's kind of why we're building in that grace period from September 15th-ish to October 1st-ish, so that if you've made the choice and you go, whoa, what a bad choice, there's, a way to transition.
Thank you.
Dr. Kavanaugh, will temperature checks be administered in the schools? There are a number of questions about temperature checks.
No, they will not. What we've learned from the Department of Public Health is that really to do temperature checks is, first of all, it's absolutely unwieldy. But second of all, when you're talking kids, especially who could be carrying the coronavirus and be asymptomatic, what we've learned is that that's kind of an exercise in futility, really, to think about doing temperature checks. What we have thought about, and we're not sure about how this product in particular would work, but there is a way to have an app on your phone that is just an attestation. So what would happen is in the morning, a parent would hear, your phone reminder go off, and you'd say, oh, yep, that's right. I have to say that my 2 children today are experiencing no symptoms, that they are in perfectly wonderful health, and I'm sending them off to school. The one worry about that is, what's going to happen when parents start forgetting to do that? I wouldn't want our school nurses on the phone all morning long calling kids down and saying to the parent, well, your child looks fine to me. Can you press the button, please? Your child looks fine to me, because we'll be losing a lot of learning time to big long lines waiting outside the nurse's office.
Dr. Kara, there are a number of questions about when would you shift to fully remote for the district? And there's a lot of them are couched in changing data around the MLB outbreak or information coming out of Florida with different experience with children and their hospitalization. So how will we know what markers we're looking for to know when to switch to fully remote?
Right. And I suppose that the answer to that is, based on the number of active cases in the Hopkinton Public Schools and maybe in the Hopkinton community. When we start seeing a spike in the virus, I would not be making that decision without feeling really informed. And I don't think that I could feel really informed unless, I looked at what other like districts were doing. So, is Holliston or Medway or Westboro or Southboro in sort of our same situation, and how are they handling it? But most importantly, I would be looking to Dr. Boda, the school nurses, Sean McAuliffe, the director of the Department of Public Health. Those are all the people who kind of get together in sort of that think tank and say, okay, what do we do right now? And if you're going to switch from hybrid to remote because of a spike in the illness, you have to be ready to do that instantly, which is why we, have those plans. So I know that's not a concrete answer. We've actually asked the Commissioner of Education if he feels like there's a percentage threshold. So when you get to 4% of your community or 100 kids in school, for example, but we have not, he continues to say it should be made at the local level.
Can I ask a question,
Please.
Amanda?
Mhm.
So I have a couple along the same lines of, will full remote students have access to teachers every day, or will they also have autonomous days? And will there be a difference in, these are a couple combined, in how much synchronous learning in person versus fully remote kids will have?
So if you are a fully remote student, you will, yes, absolutely have access to a teacher in person, synchronous, every single day. And so I'm not sure what the second part of that question was, Nancy. What was
Is there a difference in how much face-to-face time the fully remote people have versus the in-person?
Dr. Kavanaugh, you want me to add to that a little bit?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I guess the best way I can describe this for those of you that know about the workshop model at the elementary school, that typically we have 22 students in a classroom, and during an ELA block, the teacher might do a mini lesson and then is working with small groups of children while other children are off working independently. If a child is in the hybrid model at the elementary level, and Mrs. Carver or Mrs. DeBow can probably echo this, that we would anticipate, since there's such a small number of students on their on day, that the teacher is going to do their mini lesson, but there's going to be a high focus on working individually and in small groups with those children there, doing their guided reading. And then the parts of the workshop model that in a school day are occurring while they're sitting working independently while the teacher's with that small group, same thing for a math workshop, would sort of take place on the off day. If your family opts for a remote experience, we can't put your child, especially a second grader or even a fifth grader, or frankly, as a parent of an 8th grader and a 10th grader, being on Zoom all day is hard. And those of us that have been doing it all summer as adults can speak to that. I'm sure many of you can. So we would never say that a child should be sitting in Zoom all day. So instead, their workshop model is going to be broken up similarly, but it's throughout the day, right? So you might come into the morning and your teacher, your remote teacher, does a mini lesson with the whole class. And then she says to half of the class, okay, you're going to go off and practice your fluency. You're going to read your guided reading book. And I'm going to meet with you at 9 o'clock for your guided reading book discussion. And she takes one small group and those other children go off Zoom. So those children, it would be all day, but there would be periods where they're working with the teacher and then periods where they're going off, as Mrs. DeBow described, maybe they're going off to complete a math worksheet or play a math game, and then coming back in and talking to their teacher about how it went. Does that help sort of explain the difference between hybrid? You're going to focus your teacher-student time on those days where they're there in the classroom, and the other parts of the workshop would happen on the off days. Whereas the child in hybrid, in full remote, they're going to have their day broken up between times where they're on Zoom and times where they're working on those independent activities offline to continue their learning. I don't know if that helps. I mean, I think it's the same idea at the high school level, right? You go off and you read King Lear and then you come back for your discussion. And the same thing would happen in either model.
Yeah, I also understand, because someone just texted me, that there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about how kids would be put into orange and green. Some people are believing that we would be going A to L and then M to Z. What we've actually done is just mixed the families in such a way that it's almost an even split at every single school. So for example, like at Elmwood, it might be 293 kids and 297 kids. The biggest area where we had discrepancy was at the middle school. It's off by about 20 kids, but for the most part, we made nice even numbers, and families remain intact.
Nancy, did you want to keep going, or?
Sure, I could do a couple more. So I have one about specials. Will they be available on both the hybrid and the fully remote? And then along the same lines, will band be offered in the high school?
The answer to the first question is yes. The answer to the second question is it is very tricky. There is a rumor that there may be some revision to this, but what the commissioner has said is you are not allowed to play an instrument, a brass instrument or a woodwind instrument, inside. And if you are playing any of those instruments, you've got to take them outside, and kids have to be spaced at 10 feet of social distancing. That's a huge worry. You know, if what we know about the virus is that when it becomes an aerosol and you breathe it in, it immediately goes straight to your lungs. It's not as if, you might have had some, on your hand and it got into, your digestive tract. When it gets right into your lungs, that's the thing that we want to avoid. So the commissioner is not allowing that right now. Now, does that mean that we couldn't socially distance kids at 6 feet and play violins in the high school? Yes, we could do that. So Mr. Hay, we had a meeting with him, an extensive meeting yesterday morning, and he is working very hard to imagine what those things could look like and actually getting kids just a little bit of playing time. But it's going to be a huge task to be able to get kids playing time in band. It really is.
Another question is, could you please explain what happens to the elected remote learners if the whole school goes fully remote? If at the onset they did not have a Hopkinton Public School teacher, will they not join the regular full remote class?
No, so if I were a hybrid learner and say I'm part of a green cohort, and I will even pick a teacher in the Hopkinton Public Schools. So let's imagine that I'm in 3rd grade and I have Mrs. O'Malley. When we go into full remote learning because the virus has spiked, Mrs. O'Malley will still remain my teacher. We will just all be in a classroom remotely. I mean, it's really important to kind of keep the teacher and the kids and the community all together.
Okay, we're going to take a couple more and then see if we can wrap up. There were a couple of questions about secondary ed, some about science classes, how will we handle like labs and that kind of thing, and AP courses, and some questions at the middle school level, and I believe this would apply to high school as well, for hall traffic. How will we manage all the traffic? Mm-hmm. So sort of the higher level, more challenging maybe at the higher level academic classes that have hands-on labs. How do we do that? And then how do we manage traffic?
Yeah, so we are, labs are again one of those difficult things because we really want to make sure that our kids are maintaining the 6 feet of social distancing. And, does that mean that, a kid wouldn't walk past another student or no, but we wouldn't really want our kids to be kind of, hovering over something in the laboratory for, 40 minutes. That said, I think that the science department at the high school is remarkably creative. So if that lab is something that is absolutely necessary, as a part of that particular discipline or a part of the learning that would ultimately be tested by the college board, I'm sure that we can make that happen. I genuinely am. As for traffic, we are working out traffic patterns in our buildings just to keep kids, kind of flowing in the same direction, try to keep the 6 foot of social distancing when kids are out in the hallways. And I know we experienced today, like leaving a classroom and going out the back door. And of course, as we were walking, we all stayed, I think, somewhat distant from each other. Were there times when you were less than 6 feet? Absolutely. Were there times when you were more than 6 feet? Yes. But one of the things that we know about 6 feet of social distancing is, there's also the time factor. So we always say for a prolonged time, which is typically greater than 15 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to tap my colleagues here to help me out because there are so many questions that I'm scrolling through. I do see a couple of comments that we have not adequately addressed the remote learning option. So do you all see some questions that were not covered with remote learning? Uh, I mean, there are so many questions, but I think a lot of them are about how you transition back and forth and what kind of teachers will you have. There are a lot of questions about will there be Hopkinton teachers, and I think you've addressed that as being the goal, but we don't know for sure. But I'm wondering what significant remote learning questions we may have missed in this last few minutes.
There was one interesting one about will parents be able to volunteer in remote learning to do things like read circle time for kids or do, book reading or whatever? Would that be an option for parents?
In remote learning?
Correct.
Sure. I would say that that's probably teacher dependent. What need would that teacher have for a parent to partake? I will say that in person, we are having no visitors into our school buildings this year. So, if a mom wants to come and drop off a lunch, there will be no dropping off lunch. The commissioner has even said that all meetings, whenever possible, should be held remotely. So the goal is to minimize that contact. That certainly doesn't apply to the remote learning session because a parent could, do a read aloud on Zoom, for example, right?
And I think there are a lot of COVID questions that we haven't necessarily addressed. So there's been a lot of people asking questions like, if a kid remote is sick, then what does that mean for their classroom? Do they have to quarantine for 14 days? Are we expecting kids to have a test before they even come to school the first day? And if somebody, let's say, has a sibling, so if somebody tests sick and they have a sibling, then what does that mean for the sibling in their classroom and their exposure? So it's kind of a lot of what ifs, but I hope you could maybe answer something generally about it.
So to start with, are we requiring testing before kids come on the first day of school? No. The Hopkinton Public Schools can never compel any testing whatsoever. The Department of Public Health can, even strongly suggest that people are tested, and people can still say, no, I don't want to be tested, for example. But let's imagine that we are talking about a third grade classroom, for example, and a student tests positive. Anybody who is in that classroom, we are going to shut that down. And, obviously, the student who is positive is going to isolate. Everybody else is going to quarantine. A lot of those families will want to go and get their children tested. I mean, if it were my child, I would want to go and have my child tested to see if maybe they contracted COVID from the singular positive kid in there. But I would also say that in that family, say there are siblings, so one is positive. I mean, I would assume that the other student in that family would also be tested to see if that child was positive. but it would make sense to keep even the non-COVID kiddo home because we wouldn't want to have the chance that he had contracted COVID and brought that into the classroom. So if there's a negative test, then we can say, oh, good, all the other kids in that safe classroom are still sort of safe, but we would still want the sibling home. Hope I'm making sense. There's a lot of kids in this scenario.
Just back to the remote learning, because people do seem to be concerned that we're not giving enough detail to the remote learning. I think there are a number of questions about what that remote day is actually going to look like. And if I'm not mistaken, I think some of the questions around how many hours of synchronous versus asynchronous, these things have to be worked out through negotiations. So I think if people feel like they don't have a very, very clear picture, it's because that picture hasn't totally been defined yet. We need to work on that. Am I correct?
Yes. And one other thing that I'll say, because I don't want to say that, it only because teachers would feel like, it was an unsafe situation, doing sort of a live streaming with a group of kids at home while they also have, another 10 kids in their classroom. It's really hard to manage your 10 kids in this classroom while you're, instructing them, while you're also doing something over here where, it would be unusual not to interact with kids. Maybe in, some kind of classroom where somebody is just delivering a lecture, kids could, watch on that live stream, and that might actually save the teacher some time because now I don't have to record myself and push it out. But it's, as an elementary school teacher, you can't be teaching those kids electronically and those kids in person and do a good job of both of those things. I think that that's an awful lot to ask, and it ends up being with ineffective instruction for both parties. And if you're just going to tune in and watch somebody give a lecture, what's the difference between watching the lecture in real time and watching the lecture, you know, delivered remotely? So I'm just really uneasy about that live streaming. And I know there are people who are asking a lot of questions about it, but I think that it makes great sense for them to sort of take that off the table. It's just not a good instructional option.
Okay, so we are past our hour. We had a rich hour. We have literally, I want to say, between the texts, the various electronic formats here, probably close to 600 questions. So we've covered some. Some of them are duplicates, some of them are comments, but we are going to pull down this chat, pull down the Q&A, combine it with our text questions that various members have been receiving. And I know we received some emails earlier today with people who wanted to ask questions tonight via email. So there are a lot of questions. We're going to pull them down. I believe my job tomorrow is going to be to start trying to sort these by topic and get some answers and start working with Dr. Kavanaugh and this recording and so forth, and get as many answers documented for review as we can, understanding that families are being asked to make a decision on their choice to start the year by Monday, August 3rd. So we will do our very, very best. Please give us the day tomorrow. There's a lot here to digest. So we have to pull this down, and don't be looking for it tomorrow at 9 a.m. It definitely won't be out there. We're going to work on it. Dr. Kavanaugh, before we sign off, and I actually need to go back and look at the agenda and make sure I didn't miss anything. Could you just remind us what we will receive tomorrow in terms of documentation? And I know you're calling another thing a survey, but I don't want to confuse people with it being an opinion survey. I think this is more of an election document, right, of what you're going to be choosing.
That's right. It will be, should we call it a questionnaire, a selection document, a survey, whatever it is that we're calling that, it will come out tomorrow, and it is going to ask you to tell us what schools your children go to, what are the names of your children, and if you would like to have the hybrid of in-person home day learning versus the remote learning. It's very, as I said, it's really important that we get that data. I will add to that just very briefly that if you have a 7th grader who wants to be remote, the 3rd grader who wants in person, a family can split that way. You can split remote and hybrid if that works better for you. You will also get a very, very long document that has lots and lots of information in it. So if tonight you thought, oh, what did she say about that? hopefully you will find the information that you are looking for in that document tomorrow. It should come out in the afternoon tomorrow. And by Monday, you should have made a choice about whether you want remote or hybrid learning. And please remember again that you can reach out to my office, but you can always, if in September you start in one model and you think this has been a grave mistake, you can jump in that first couple of weeks. That's our grace period.
Okay, so that's our homework. Our homework for tomorrow for us and for the community. A lot of reading, a lot of digesting, a lot of discussion, a lot of family considerations, a lot of data to sift through. And this is a difficult time. We are in a pandemic. It is challenging for everybody. It's challenging at home. It's challenging over the summer. It's just, socially, academically, you name it. So each family has to obviously take their own situation into account and given the data available and make their choices. And we're doing our best to support you in that decision making. So please reach out if you have additional questions after tomorrow that we haven't answered yet. Colleagues of mine, do you have anything else you want to add tonight?
Great job, everybody. Wow, Dr. Kavanaugh.
Great job, yeah. And thank you everyone for coming and asking these questions. Definitely food for thought and more things to consider and hopefully get you answers to so you can make good decisions.
Yes, I do want to thank parents for being as patient as you possibly can. I know this is an awfully large undertaking and something to really think about. And I do want to thank all of my administrative team, all of the teachers, everybody who is, working in the ranks of the Hopkinton Public Schools, everyone. And Georgette Wagar, thank you for all of your work today. We've tortured you all day long, so thank you. Thank you for enduring us.
For sure. Okay, so I think at this point we will close the public forum, and it is 9:25 for the purpose of minutes. And I believe that I will be seeking a motion for adjournment. I would first like to just reiterate thank you so much to all of you, to the Readvisory Committee, which RAG, the Readvisory Group. Just so much thought, effort, and care is going into this decision making, and all the administrative team. Dr. Kavanaugh, I don't think you sleep. I'm pretty sure you don't sleep. We didn't get to do any recognitions today, but we have so many people to recognize and thank for the effort, the thought, the time, the debate. We don't make it easy on each other, and I think there's a lot of debate. As much debate as we see in the questions has happened among the people who are shown here and the whole Readvisory Committee. So I feel grateful that there's so much thought and concern and dedication from this whole community. So with that, I would like to seek a motion to adjourn.
I think that's my job.
Okay,
Move to adjourn this meeting.
Meg made a motion. Any second on that?
I'll second that.
Motion by Meg, second by Nancy. I'm going to take a roll call vote. Leah?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Meg?
Aye.
Joe? Don't think Joe made it on. And I'm a yes, that's 4 in favor, 1 not present. So we are adjourned for the evening at 9:27. Our next school committee meeting is next Thursday. It's a regular scheduled meeting. This was a special meeting just for reopening. So next Thursday, 7 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night. And Georgette, I'll be talking to you about downloading the chat. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Night.